This is fab. Right, so question. How many of you have got a scan and cut still in the box or on a shelf? Have you used it? Okay, if you use it all the time, this is going to be really boring because it's an absolute beginners. But I think it's worth watching, but it's literally from unboxing it. Because keep having a what with it? A dither? Do you? Do what you said? Or what's she doing? I know, that's the thing. So I used to, every time we go to a show and people will come past and they'll go, I've got one. I'm like, and? It's still in the box. I'm like, this is so frustrating because for a craft product to hold my attention for 7.5 years is absolutely unheard of, because I have a craft room that is just full of stuff that I bought and I've done what I wanted to do with it. And then I'm like, right, what's next? And I want everybody that's spent a considerable amount of money on a machine to get the most out of it. So I spoke to Stephanie, I was like, right, you're doing your free painting pages class. I want to do a free scan and cut one. We've actually had about 525 people sign up. So, yes! But when we do this every month, I need you to promise me faithfully that even if you don't work on your machine tonight, you work on it and you do what I teach you in this class before next month. Because even if it's just cutting out a basic shape, the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. And what we'll do is we'll build these classes like little chapters. And then at the end, we'll make a project with everything that you've learned so far, which I think will be a really nice thing to do. So I just need you to promise me that you're going to try it, please. Because I promise you, once you try it, and it's like, it'll be like the first time you ever saw a washing machine and you had no idea what all the buttons do. Until you press them, you don't know. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to press the buttons and see what they do, because it is brilliant. And even now, I'm still learning new things, which is really exciting. So I will absolutely continue to do these classes for you, but I need you to get on board. There's what? Oh, Andy's going to mute you all because there's so many of you. If you've got any questions, type it in the chat, and then we'll make sure that we sort them out. Now, we're going on from here. So we're on here 6:30 till 7:30, then I'm at 7:45, I'm going straight into a CM class. So if I don't get to answer all the questions tonight, I'll have a look at them and we'll sort them out later on this week, because I'm up to my eyes in work this week. I've got so many launches this weekend, it's crazy. Right, so SDX, first things first. So Brother brought out the CM machine 7.5 years ago, and then did a worldwide survey across all the countries that they sell into as to what was the changes, that if the customer could make a change to this scan and cut, what would it be? The first one was an auto blade, because it meant that you didn't have to learn all the pressures and the blade depths for different cardstock and materials. And I get that. I absolutely get that that scares people, because if you, sorry, I've been talking all day today. If you have a mat and you don't get the pressure and blade depth right and it cuts through that mat, that's really frustrating. So I understand that. What I did was learnt all the settings, because then I can make the machine really precise and do exactly what I want it to do. And there are even some times now when I'm using the SDX where I will use the CM blade and housing, because for vinyl, for example, it cuts it better than the SDX blade, because the SDX blade is a stronger blade, which is why they brought out a vinyl blade for the SDX. And scoring a piece of card with a blade is better with the CM blade. But I understand why people thought that that was a really good idea. The other thing they wanted was it quieter, and it is whisper quiet. I was working in the main creative department yesterday, and I had to keep walking around to the desk to make sure it was still cutting, because it was that quiet. I was like, has it stopped? Somebody's like, no, it's still cutting. So it's all those little things. So I just want to talk you around the basics of the machine, and then we're going to look inside and see what the buttons do, and we're going to make our first cut. And then if we've got time, we'll weld something together so you can start making your shape cards. But it's going to be very, 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 very basic. So I'm just warning you now. So if you're somebody that's been using it a lot, don't expect to learn anything new in this class because we're starting right at the beginning. So I'm presuming that none of you have got it out of the box. You've never switched it on and you don't know what anything is. So that's how we're going to run the classes because I have to work to somebody that's never taken it out of the box. So first thing, sorry, I just need to have a really good cough. Bear with. Andrew, can you just put a different still in or something for me? I've had two 2-hour classes today, back to back. My voice is feeling it a bit. Right, I'm all right now. Thank you. Andrew? You want to come back to me? Sorry, there's a code that Andrew put up there. I'll explain that later on. Right, so out of the box, when you open up the machine, there's a lot of packaging inside. So all the cardboard, all the blue tape needs to come off. And you might find that your blade housing is in the middle of the machine, okay? So you can either push it back like that, just using your finger, or you can, when you switch it on, it will put this into the correct position. Like that. So we can move like that, or you can just push it back like that. This is also useful when you come to clean your machine because you need to make sure that this cutting strip stays clean and that your rollers stay clean. So we'll go through all that as we go through the classes as well. In the cardboard box underneath your machine will be a little white wallet with the blades and everything else in. So if you bought an SDX 1200, you will get the regular blade, which is the one with the black top like this. And then you will also get one that's like this with the cream top, and that's for fabric. And it cuts fabric brilliantly, I have to say. So the first thing that we're going to do is when you open up your machine, the bar will automatically be up. All right, so it's on a spring loaded. So that grey bar will automatically be up. You are literally going to take the blade and with the Brother logo facing forward, you're going to drop it into that housing like that. So it pushes down and then just push the grey bar down. That then is your blade loaded. To change your blade, which the last time I changed mine was about 6 months ago, and bear in mind I use mine every single day. You unscrew this unit, and inside is a little spring. Don't lose the spring, whatever you do. And then just take the blade out, pop a new one in, and then screw it back together again. It's important that you keep this clean. So every now and again, if you've been cutting things like grey board or even fabric or just regular cardstock, just give it a little tap and you'll see lots of bits of fluff fall out. We need to make sure that we keep this clean. And then you just tighten that up. And you'll notice that there is no numbers around here at all. So if I bring in the old CM blade, you can see it's got numbers around. That's the blade depth. You don't have a blade depth on this because this goes along, looks at the depth of the material that you're cutting, and then decides how many times it needs to cut it. So we're going to pop the blade in there like that. On the side of your machine, you'll have a lever. And it says number 1 and number 2. So what this does, which is different to the CM machine, is in the machine, so you've got your main roller here at the front that takes the mat in, and then underneath there at the back, there's another silver bar here. Underneath there, there's some little tiny rollers. They're what they call the back rollers, and that helps guide the mat in through your machine. However, when you're scanning something in, it wouldn't go much thicker than 1 millimetre without catching those rollers. So they've done this so that you can lift the back rollers. Because you can scan in up to 3 millimetres on the SDX, they've done it so that you can lift the back rollers. The machine will prompt you. So if you try and scan something in that's too thick, it will prompt you to lift that lever up. So it's really intuitive in the fact that it tells you, gives you all the instructions as you're going along on the screen, which is brilliant. First time I looked at mine and read the instruction leaflet, I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm just going to press the buttons and see what happens. Because it's not written by a crafter. It's written by a technical person that understands all the technology words. And I'm like, don't know what that means. What does that button do? The other time it will ask you to lift this roller is if you're drawing. So if you've got your pens and your pen holder, which comes with the SDX 1200, it doesn't come with the 900, or you've got the universal pen holder, when you put in something to draw, it will ask you to lift the back rollers, and that's so that those rollers don't go through the ink when you're drawing and drag it, so it doesn't smear your work. But again, it will prompt you to do that. So that's what the lever is for at the side. More often than not, you'll have it down so that the back rollers are down, because that controls the mat better. On the other side, you've got a USB port. So we can't film that, unfortunately. We're in a little studio, and if I turn this around, I'll never get it back in the right place. But you'll see there's a USB port in the side. So that is for if you want to scan and save images to your USB. So you can use this as a regular scanner, because that's what Brother do. They make scanners. If you want to save a file, now we sell on Highlight Crafts now a compatible blank USB, which is perfect. And I have several of them, and every time I get a new Two Red Robins USB or a Tattered Lace USB or what was Cutting Craftorium, I would save all the files that I created onto a blank USB, which is really important. So it's that kind of thing that you might need the USB port for. The other thing they added was storage, which is brilliant for me because I'm constantly losing my accessories. So really good storage in these two compartments, so that's different. This little button here at the side is to do with the vinyl roll feeder, and we'll do that further down in the classes because that's a little bit too advanced at the moment because you have to use Canvas Workspace. But that's what that lever's for, so at least you know what it is. At the back of the machine, there is a tray that you can pull out. So the customers were saying to Brother that as the mat went through, the card was separating from the mat because the mat was flopping over the back of the table. So they built in a shelf that you can pull out. You can use it or not use it. To be honest, it doesn't make that much difference, but it's there if you want it. So before we go any further into the machine, I want to talk to you about your mats because they changed them from for the SDX. So on the CM machine, you can load the mat in either way. All right, so there's an arrow on each top and bottom of the mat. On the SDX, you can only load it in one way, and that's because a lot of customers wanted a hole at the bottom so they could hang their mats to store them. So we need to be even more careful about how we keep our mats clean. So right down here, down the left and right hand side of your mat, you need to keep that really clean. And the reason for that is if there's any sticky residue from glue or any bits of card or whatever it might be stuck on here, and your rollers take that mat into the machine, if there's anything on there that could like sticky stuff, you know, masking tape, washi tape, all that kind of stuff, if you get any down there, when your roller takes it in, so say your left-hand roller takes it in and it hits that bit of glue, it stops moving. And then the right-hand roller takes over and your mat twists. You also need to keep your rollers clean, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. So make sure that this part at the top is kept nice and clean, because where the arrow is in the middle, because those are your registration marks. So when you load your mat in, that tells the Scan and Cut which mat you're using. So it knows which mat's in the machine. It knows if you've got the wrong mat in the machine because it will tell you that it's not the right mat. And that's really important that you keep that clean. On the back, you will feel on the left and right hand side, there's like a little almost gritty feel. It feels different to the middle of the mat. That's a little grip so the rollers can grip your mat, okay? So that's important that you keep that clean as well. And then inside your machine, these two rollers, one on the left and one on the right here, these black ones, these you need to keep clean. So what I do quite often is just take a wet wipe out of a packet, leave it to go just so it's just damp, and put it against the roller. And then when you load and unload your mat, so you press the button load and unload, it turns the rollers. And as it turns the rollers, it cleans them. So it's really important that you keep your mat pristine and clean. Now, just said all that, my mat is not pristine and clean because I've had it for a long, long time. And one of the things that the customers weren't happy about with the Scan and Cut was the tackiness of the mat, because it doesn't last long enough. A mat will never last as long as we want, because we want them to last forever. But what happens is every time you put a piece of card on your mat and take it off, it leaves fibres behind. So you can wash your mats just literally in warm soapy water, dry them, leave them to air dry, and then you will get some of your tacky back. But then what I do is I re-tack it with pin flare stencil glue, and that makes a massive difference. And in the next class, I'll show you how to re-tack your mat, because for this class, you won't need to if you've got a brand new mat. It's really interesting because the adhesive that Brother used is almost fused onto the mat, so it never comes off, but it gets covered. I find that using the pin flare glue, stencil glue, makes it a better mat anyway. Even if it's a brand new mat, sometimes I'll put a thin layer of stencil glue on, especially on a low tack mat, because I know that it grips it better. It's tacky. It feels, if you put a little bit of stencil glue between your fingers and you put it on and there's nothing there, there's no tackiness there, and then as the air hits it, it starts to get tacky. And that means that you can pick your mat up literally, she says, on a plastic mat, bear with, like that, because it's a different kind of adhesive. It feels stickier, and I use it all the time. And I got Brother to say yes to authorising the fact that you can use it as long as you re-tack your mat properly, so I'll cover that. Right, screen. So your screen is different on a SDX because it pulls up on different levels. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different options. So depending on where the light is in your room will depend on where your screen goes. It doesn't matter where it goes, as long as you can see it. And the first button on the top, on the right-hand side, is the universal symbol for power. So you need to, if you've had a CM before and you've changed to an SDX, you'll be like, well, it's not switching on, because you'll do that, because that's what you do on a CM. You literally just press the power button. On an SDX, you've got to hold it a little bit longer. So just be aware of that. It's only a couple of seconds, but it's one of those that's not an instant thing. Once you put it on home, this green light will appear, so you know you switched on, and the Brother logo will appear on your screen. And this screen is absolutely crystal clear. I know it doesn't look it on the screen that you're watching it on now because it's blue, because you're looking at a screen through a screen through a screen. But it is a really good quality screen. Once this starts to appear, you know that you're ready to start. And the next button down from the on button is a home button. And we want to start at the home page. Okay, so we're going to press the home button and a little message will come up. And it will tell you that the carriage will move to the initial position. Keep your hands away from the carriage. Now, the scan and cut is incredibly intelligent, but it can't read your mind. So it doesn't know when you've read that message. So the way that you tell it that you've read it is by pressing OK. Please use your stylus that comes with your scan and cut. Okay, don't be tempted to use your fingernail like I do all the time, because you don't want to damage your screen. So I'm going to press OK. It's going to put the blade and the housing into the correct position, so it will move, so just be aware of that, and then you're ready to start. So I want to go through some of the things, some of the settings that are inside the machine with you in this class so that you understand what's what, okay? So in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little spanner on the actual lit screen. And whenever you see a spanner, there's something behind it. It's like a toolbox. So to open the toolbox, we click on the spanner. And we're going to go through just some of these pages so that I can tell you what does what. And because we're going to send you this class, you can watch it over and over and over again. So you don't have to remember any of this. You can learn it at your own leisure, but I really want you to all have used your machine by this time next month, okay? So the language that the instructions are given to you in, you can change, but I would assume that most of you would have them in English. The unit of measurement you can have in millimeters or inches. And the way you change it is literally by pressing the button. It's that simple. You tap it, it changes from millimeters to inches. And underneath, you'll see the cut area. So when you change it to inches, it changes that measurement as well. So the cut area, if we just click on that, shows you the mat. Now it's a 12 by 12 inch mat, but the cut area is smaller because it's the internal cut area. So it's the area that is available within that mat for you to cut on. And that's 11.73 inches from top to bottom by 11.65 inches wide. So everything from teeny, teeny, tiny to that big, you can do on the 12 by 12 mat that comes in your kit. The way that you change your mat size, so if you're working on a 12 by 24 inch mat, and there is a little myth going around that you can only use the 12 by 24 inch mats on some of the machines and not all of them. That's not true. You can cut on a 12 by 24 inch mat on every single scan and cut that we've ever brought you at Create and Craft. You can't scan it in on some of the machines. So the SDX 900, you can cut on the mat, but you can't scan it in. If I'm being really honest, I can't remember the last time I scanned in a 12 by 24 inch mat. So for me, that's not an issue. Also on this machine, you can scan in just the first 6 inches or 12 inches of a mat, or 18 inches on the 1200. So I really don't think that you need to worry about that. As long as you can scan in on a mat, on a cutting mat or a scanning mat, you don't need to worry about a 12 by 24, I don't think. That's just my personal opinion. If you've got a piece of paper on that mat, on your mat, and you want it to just cut out in a certain area of that paper, you can use these drag arrows to move the cut area. And once you drag these arrows, anything that's grey, it ignores completely. So say you've got a piece of fabric and it's got a design around the outside edge, but you want to cut something out of the middle, you can absolutely make that happen by using those drag arrows to change the cut area, okay? I don't tend to use it for that unless I am designing something where I want to line things up, and we'll come to that later on. But for general use, you can use this. If you're thinking, well, I want to use A4 card, that's fine. You can scan it in. So when you scan it in, you'll be able to see it on your screen, and then you can position your shapes, or you can do it the way that I've just shown you by using the drag arrows. Once you've finished on a screen and there's nothing else that you want to do on it, there will always be a blue box in the bottom right-hand corner, and that will either say OK or set. So once you finish, you press OK, you tell the machine you finished by pressing OK, and it takes you back to the previous screen. This one down here, the pattern interval, is the distance between the shapes. So if your pattern interval's on 1 and you put 3 circles on your mat, they will be as close as they can for it to be able to cut them cleanly. The higher the number that you increase the pattern interval to, the further apart the spaces will become. And once we start doing little projects in the classes, you'll understand why we need that. For now, you don't need to worry about it. If you're an absolute beginner, don't even worry about it, because you're not going to need it yet. I'm going to go down to page 2 just to show you the cutting things. So right at the top, you've got background. And if I click on the first button, that makes the background darker. So this is when you're scanning in a piece of material, a piece of paper, a piece of card, and you want the pattern that's on that to be more vibrant so that you can see it. You make the background darker. If you want it lighter, so if you're scanning in a piece of black card and you can't see the cutting file because it's on a piece of black card, you can make it lighter, or you can switch it off altogether, okay? Now your cut speed here on your SDX goes up to 9. So I would advise that right now, or when you get it out of the box, when you're watching this class back, you put your cut speed on 9 and you never ever change it. It's never failed me in the 7.5 years that I've been using this, and all the years that I used a Cricut, because someone once told me, the guy who invented the Cricut said to me, the quicker the speed, the better the cut. And it's never failed. It doesn't matter whether I go to cutting fabric, felt, mylar, Doveflex, grey board, I always keep my speed on full, and it's never let me down. If it's tearing a piece of paper or it's not cutting through, it's nothing to do with the speed at all. So put your speed on 9 and you never need to worry about it again. Pressure down here, it says auto. That's because you've got an auto blade in your machine. However, you can also change that, so you can then put yourself in charge of that auto blade, because sometimes you want a lighter pressure and sometimes you want a greater pressure, depending on what you're cutting. So they've put them on there anyway, because they know that at some point you might need to take it off auto and be in charge of that blade. And we'll talk about that as we go through the classes as well. So there will be times when I go, right, you need to take your cut pressure down to minus something or up to plus something. But for now, we're just going to start cutting basic shapes. We can leave it on auto. Down here, you've got cut pressure for a manual blade. So if you already own a CM machine and you've upgraded, you will have one of these, this fabulous little blade here. And then that's your manual blade. So you can put your CM blade into your SDX, but it will not make it an auto blade. I use this one for vinyl and I use it for scoring. So I do use this quite a lot. And also when it's doing perforation lines, which we do a lot, it's quicker using this blade because it cuts differently. The SDX is more precise, so it'll go down, along and up, move, down, along and up. This one just goes, so I use this for perforations all the time. So there's a lot of times when that blade crosses over, and it's not a bad thing, it's just that I know that to score a piece of card and get the faintest score line down a piece of card, that blade is better because you're in control of it. And we'll learn all that as we go through these classes, because we're not going to stop these classes until you're sick of the sight of us, until you've learned everything that I've learned so far. So we're then going to scroll down again. Now the cut amount is how deep that blade cuts. So it's like your blade depth, if you like. Now, I believe that there's been an update recently, and I haven't updated my machine yet. Because this machine is an SDX and because it's Wi-Fi enabled, and when I'm saying this, I'm talking to everybody that owns any SDX. When you switch it on and you've linked it to your Wi-Fi at home or wherever you are, it will come up with a little I, an update available. And then you just click on that and it will update your machine for you. I haven't updated the recent one, but I believe that they've put in more, it's updated itself here, look. So it used to be that it was just 0.5 millimeters, 1 millimeter, okay? Now it's 0.1 millimeters, 0.3 millimeters, 0.5 millimeters. I'm smiling because I'll tell you a story in a minute, and 1 millimeter and 3 millimeters. Now, when it first came out, there were two options. And I knew at some point, because I know how the machine works, I knew at some point they would have to add more. Because sometimes when you're cutting something really fine, like a copier paper, for example, you might want to make your English paper piecing templates out of copier paper. 0.5 millimeters is too deep a blade depth, and all that blade depth is cutting into your mat. So if you're cutting something really fine, use that to your full advantage. It still has the auto on, so it will detect and it will decide what it needs to cut, but the auto blade doesn't look at the density of a product. So for example, a construction acetate might only be 0.5 mil thick, but it might need cutting 3 times because it's dense. There's no fibers for it to tear. So I'm glad they've put other options on because that gives us other options when we're using it. And again, as we go into the project section of these classes, we'll learn more about that. Half cut is when you're using vinyl, which we're not going to do for a while. And then all your others are kind of, you don't really need to know yet, okay? The other thing that you need to know is this bit here. So your unique serial number to you is on your machine here. This number is unique to your machine. When we go into Canvas Workspace, way down the line, you will need that number. If anything ever goes wrong with your machine, you will need that number. This tells you which version it's working on. So it's working on 1.62. And then here, if there's an update available, you can plug it in and get the update there, but it just does it manually. Machine information. So your machine information tells you that you've got a maximum scanning area on this machine of 12 by 24. On the SDX 900, it will say 12 by 12. Maximum pattern number is 900. That means you could cut 900 shapes at once, as long as they fit on your mat. So if you're making confetti for wedding tables and you want 900 little hearts, it will allow you to cut 900. If you try and put 901 in, it'll go, can't do that, too many shapes. If you group the 900 together, it then sees it as one. So then you can add more. So it's knowing all these little tricks. And then the embroidery data. So if you have a Brother embroidery machine, this machine will read PES, PHC, and PHX files without having to convert them from your embroidery machine to here. So you could send a shape from here and it would embroider it on your embroidery machine, or you could send a file from your embroidery machine onto here and it will cut it, I believe. I need to do a bit more research on that because I don't sew at the moment. Okay, so Karen's asked, what should we keep the cut amount on for general use? I would have it on auto or 0.5 millimeters, to be honest, because you don't need much thicker than that unless you're cutting grey board. And even then you want a gentle cut. So 0.5 more often than not. It's interesting today because we've been using some of the Anna Marie Designs craft card. And on a CM machine, I know that this needed a blade of 6 and a pressure of 2 because it's really dense. It's really thick. It's really well laminated. So all those layers are bonded together, but it makes it quite dense. So for that, I put it up to 1 because I knew that it would need more of that pressure, if you like, that blade depth. So the next bit is your network. So this is how you link to your Wi-Fi. So you click on that and it says Wi-Fi enable on, so it will be off when you get it. You switch it on and then you go to setup wizard and you will find it will come up. It might not do it in this room because it's in a little studio. It will come up with your network from home and then it will ask you for the password for your network. It's on the back of your router. Now you might all be sitting there going, yes, we know that, Mel. I didn't know where it was. So I was like, what's this password that it needs? So like, it's on the back of your router. You know, when I say I'm a technophobe, I am an absolute technophobe. So for this one, we've got highlight crafts. Now I've already done this before. So it will come up with a green spot. So when I click on this, it won't ask me for the code. It will come up and it'll say there is a saved access point information. Are you okay to connect with this information? So if you go to 7 different places with your scan and cut and you connect to their Wi-Fi, when you go back, it will recognize it. So I'm just going to say yes, and it will connect to the Wi-Fi. I'm not going to show you how to connect it to Canvas yet because you don't need to, because we're starting right at the beginning. But that's the next bit down. So once you've done that, you're going to go back and then Canvas Workspace is here. Don't worry about registering your machine. You don't need to, because you've got that serial number that's in there. And when we come to do Canvas, I'll show you everything that you need to know. So right now, that's all we need to learn as far as what's inside the machine. And that's a lot of information. So I want you to go back and just watch this again. Andrew, sorry, darling, what did you say? So someone's asked why would they need a scanning mat? We'll come to that. So next thing is we're going to go into our basic shapes. So into your patterns, and these are all your categories. So we've got basic shapes, images and icons, welded words or phrases, borders, alphabets. This one here is a drawing only file, all right? So don't try and cut that because it will just cut lines, it won't cut out. So that's for single line drawing. So if you click on that, you've got a single line font in there. So if you don't like the openness of the other fonts for drawing, you've got a single line font in there for you. So it will draw like you would draw. Then you've got another alphabet. You've got 100 quilt block patterns. You've got applique designs, but actually you can use them for all sorts of things. So if we click on one of these, for like the cake, for example, you can change the size of it and it will change all those layers to fit that size. So if you want a 5-inch birthday cake, you set the height to 5 inches, and then when you press OK, it breaks down all the layers for you. This one at the bottom puts all the pieces on the mat in one go, just so that you know. So I want you to have a play around with some of these. So if I click on that, for example, and press OK and set it on the mat, I can then edit and ungroup it, and we'll go back to that in a bit, and it separates all these layers. So it puts all these files on in one go, like that. And that's different to the CM machines. So have a play around with this. So you might just want that cake stand there, or you might just want the icing, or you might just want these little circles here. you can separate those out, which is great. So I want you to have a play around with those patterns, but what we're going to do right now is cut a basic shape, because you'll do it and you'll go, is that it? And I'll be like, yeah, that's it. So first thing we're going to do is go into patterns, and we're going to go into basic shapes. So click on the basic shapes category, and all these shapes in here are resizable. So all those nesting dies that you own, and you've never quite got the right size and shape of oval or rectangle or whatever you're cutting, you've now got, because it will cut from 3 millimeters to 298 millimeters. So you've got 295 different sizes of circles. The oval, you only have one, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So we're going to click on the square, and it will bring it up on this screen. So you can resize it from here. All right, so this is your resize. It tells you it's 3.994 inches high by 3.94 inches wide. Just by pressing the plus at the side, you can make it bigger, or you can make it smaller. Also from this screen, if you think I don't do inches, you can go into your spanner here and you can change it to millimeters. So you just go, and then when you're finished, remember, we press OK, because that's how we tell it we've read the instruction and we've done what we've done. So you can now, again, make it bigger or make it smaller. The number here, now if I had my way, that number would say quantity, because to me a number is a number, a quantity is an amount, but the number is the quantity of shapes. So if you want to set more than one, you just press the plus to however many you want. If it can't fit them on the mat, it will tell you that it can't fit them on. So you're not wasting any card, you're just designing all this, you're setting up your mat before you start even cutting. This number here is the code of the shape. So that's how brother know that the square is called BA, so BA for basic, and it's A001 because it's the first shape that you come to. When I do project USBs, like made from the memory, where I teach you to make your own files from the shapes that are inside your machine, which is way down the line, I will refer to those codes. So that's what I'll say, choose shape, and I'll put that code in because it's easier than trying to explain where the shape is, so you'll know where they are. This one here is the magic little button that opens up a whole world of creativity. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to bring on the oval, and I'm going to show you this while we're here because this is brilliant. So I had a lady come to me once at a show, and she said to me, her husband said to me, my wife owns thousands of dies. Why does she need one of these? So I said to her, how many oval dies do you have? She said, oh, hundreds. She said, because every time I buy a topper kit and I want to mat and layer it, there's never an oval that's the right shape and size. I said, right, watch this. So I went to edit and I rotated it, and we'll go back over this again, so don't worry. And I rotated it so it was that way around. And then I went to the resize box, because you can resize here as well, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. This button here, that's also on the screen that we were working on, is called Unlock Aspect Ratio. And I went, what on earth is that? What does that mean? I've no idea what that means. So I pressed it and I found out. If you press the plus now, you'll see that only the height moves. So you can have a tall, skinny oval. You can also change the width. So you can have a shorter, wider oval. You can make it into a circle if you want to, but it means that you have every single combination of oval that you can ever imagine in millimeter increments. And her husband looked at her and he went, just buy one. And she did, because it's the versatility of having that unlock aspect ratio that is amazing. And that is one of my favorite buttons on the scan and cut, because you're in control. You're not thinking, oh, I can't mat and layer that topper because I haven't got the right size oval, or I can't have that aperture that size because then all the rest of my stuff won't fit. You can make the project that's in your head, which is really exciting. But we'll learn a little bit at a time. So the way that I will teach you is I'll teach you the little bit that you need to know to do the bit that you want to do next. So let's go back to our square that we did first of all. And we've got our square there. So that's unlock aspect ratio. It separates the height and the width so you can change them independently. This button here is only on an SDX. So if you're, I might come back to that at a later point because it's not relevant now, okay? So we're going to come back to the percentage in a different class because it will get too complicated. There's a little spanner here. So again, you can change your cut size, your cutting increment here from millimeters to inches. You can also change your cut area here, and you can also change your pattern interval here. So instead of having to come out of it and go to the home screen and go into the main settings, if it's relevant to what you're doing on that screen, it will be behind the little toolbar that's on. And that's something else that they did with the SDX. They put this in more places, so it's more easily accessible. So I'm just going to press OK, and we're just going to set this on the mat. Because remember, I said when you finished on a screen, it's either OK or set in the bottom right-hand corner. So we've now got our screen on our mat, and we can use our stylus to move that round our mat like that. Okay, so we can just move it. So let's just position it up there for now. Now we want to cut that. That's all we want to do. That's all I want you to do is cut a shape. So we've set it on the mat. You're then going to take a piece of card and you're going to put it on top of your mat. And if it's a brand new standard mat, you are very lightly going to run your hand over the top like that. So it burnishes it down onto your mat. If your mat's a little bit older and it's losing its tack a bit, you can use this spatula that came with the machine and you can burnish it down. If you want to, and I would advise this, and this isn't a sales ploy at all because that's not what these classes are about, you can buy one of these, because I went to Brother and went, what's that? So what good is that? That's no good for burnishing down a piece of card. Oh, I need something like this. So I showed them something similar to this that was from a Dreamweaver stencil company that I used to work with years ago. And they came up with this, and it's brilliant because it just burnishes your card on there perfectly. You're then going to open the front of your machine up, and you're going to put your mat with the arrow facing in up to the rollers so that it just tucks underneath, okay? But keep hold of your mat, because if you let that go now, you might pull the mat out. And then the rollers might grab one outside of your mat and load it in sideways, and you don't want that. So you're going to push that up to your rollers like that. And then the button that's underneath home on here, and I'll wait for Andrew to change the camera for you. This button here, looks like your mat with the grid on, and it's got an arrow going in and an arrow going out, is your load and unload mat. So all I'm going to do now is press that button, and it's going to take that mat in, and it's going to load that mat. Now all we're going to do is cut that shape. It's as simple as that. So we're going to press OK, and you'll get to this button that says please select. So again, there's a little arrow here, which means it's a drop-down menu. So you're going to click on that, and you're going to tell it that you want to cut. And now it's ready. So there is a little spanner here. You can click on that, and that opens up that screen that we saw earlier. So cut speed, cut pressure auto, cut pressure manual blade, cut amount auto. Okay. Now auto, I don't think was on that cut amount when we first did it. It was 0.5 millimeters and 1 millimeter. So they've also put an auto on there. That will have come as a free update with your machine. Okay, so you don't need to do anything except press that little I button when it appears to tell you there's a new update, and it will automatically update your machine for you for free, which is brilliant. So we're going to press OK now, and all we're going to press is start. And now it's going to cut that shape out. It's as simple as that. Now this is absolute basics, but it's what you need to know to get the best out of your machine. It's a cutting machine. You need to be able to cut. So that's what it's going to do. So it takes its time, it looks at the depth of the product that's on the mat, and it decides how much pressure or blade depth it needs. So basically the auto replaces these numbers because it will work it out for you. There are some times where you might need to adjust it because you know that some cards are denser than others. Doflex Mylar, anything plastic doesn't have any fibres to cut through, but we'll talk about all that as we go through. And it's cut a perfect square. So always check just before you unload your mount that you've got your square and it's cut a perfect square, okay? Now I always move my shape in a little bit because cutting right in that top corner, sometimes it hasn't got enough pressure to force down. So I always move it in a little bit. If you find that it's not cutting cleanly all the way around, then instead of doing auto, put it on 0.5 or 1 millimeter because it's the blade depth. So you still need to think about the card that you're cutting, even though it's got an auto blade, because you're thinking about the density of it, not the thickness of it. It'll work out the thickness for you, but you'll know which card is denser than another. I would always advise you to use a solid core cardstock, unless it's white, because white core cardstock has chalk, is made with chalk, and chalk will blunt your blades quicker. American Crafts cardstock is like trying to find hen's teeth at the moment. It's hard work because we haven't got the supply chain through to Create and Craft sorted yet. We have taken that on board at Highlight Crafts, and we are going to be bringing you packs of card, which is out of exactly the same factory that American Crafts use. So it's exactly the same cardstock, but instead of selling it in spring, summer, autumn, winter, we're selling it in blues, greens, yellows, pinks, reds, purples. So you can buy the colours that you want, because I found I was always left with loads of colours that I didn't use as much. And I always ran out of greens and pinks and reds first. So we're doing it slightly differently. Okay, so that's making your first cut. The next thing I want to show you, because we've got 15 minutes, is welding two shapes together, because I want you to practice this before next class, okay? So I'm going to press home. When you're finished, my dad always taught me, if you get lost, press go home. So I'm going to press home, and that asks you if you're okay to delete all the patterns. You cannot delete any of the images that are pre-installed in the machine's memory. What that's referring to is just deleting it off the mat. So I'm going to press OK because I'm happy for it to do that. I'm going to unload my mat for now because I like to work with this closed because I can get closer to the screen. It's more comfortable. Whatever works for you. So we're going to go back into our basic shapes. And we're going to choose a scallop circle. So we're going to scroll down until we find a scallop circle. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to ask it to do 2, and I'm going to set them on the mat. So remember, set or OK, that blue box in the bottom corner. I'm going to move this one over the top of that one, so it's overlapping. So think about welding as gluing. You can't glue 2 pieces of card together without overlapping them. You can't sew 2 pieces of fabric without overlapping them. So that's what welding is. So if you want to take 2 shapes and make them into one shape, this is what you do. You overlap them. Now you decide whether you go into edit, because we're changing the shapes. This little button down here is your directional arrows. This enables you to click on that and move it incrementally like that, rather than just dragging it. Every time you press one of these arrows, it moves it by 0.5 millimeter. So on these CM machines, it's 1 millimeter. On the SDX machines, it's 0.5 millimeter. So that's, if you're thinking, oh, I just want it to overlap a bit more, you know it's 0.5 millimeter each space. That is a really good thing to know, especially when you start to create different like 3D projects, or you're lining things up. So it's always 0.5 millimeter. So now I've got those 2 circles overlapping. So at the top of your screen here, you've got one little red box, and that means that just one shape is selected. So whatever's got a red box around it is the shape that's selected. To weld 2 things together, we need to select both shapes, because otherwise it's not going to recognize the other shape. It's not going to do anything with it. So we have to have both shapes selected. So if one red box means that that's selected, 3 red squares means that you're multiple selecting. So you're selecting more than one. So we multiple select, and then you get this screen. This is if you've got another shape down here that you don't want to be involved in the welding, you would select that and drag the arrow over the shape, because once you black it out, it will ignore it, which again, we'll cover later on, probably next time. This one is all of the mat. So if we click on that, once you click on a button, it turns blue, and both of those shapes there are now selected. So now we need to tell it what we want it to do with them. We can't tell it on here because that icon isn't on this screen. So it's that blue button again, bottom right-hand corner. So we press OK. We're going to edit the object. So we object edit. And at the bottom here, it looks like a little keyhole. It's actually a triangle that has been welded to a circle. That is called weld. So when you click on that, it processes that information and it welds those two shapes together. It gives you an option to cancel it if you want to. So if you think, oh, that's overlapped a bit too much or not enough, you can cancel it and then change it and then re-weld it. Once you've welded it, you can't unweld it. So just know that, okay? But I'm happy with that, so I'm going to press OK. So I'm now going to get it to cut that out. So different options, and I will talk to you about scanning as well before we go, because somebody's asked about a scanning mat. I'm going to open this up and we're going to load this mat in. Now, we've already got a square cut out of here. So rather than going right, so it's about 4 and a bit inches over to the right and about 4 and a bit inches down, we can scan it in. So we press OK and we keep going with OK until we find this button here, which is a square with a scanner bar going over it. So it's a scanner. This is your scanning symbol here. So we're going to click on that and press start. And it's now going to scan this mat in. And then what it will do is bring a full colour image up of that card on this screen so that you can move your shape and put it exactly where you want it on your card. So you don't waste any card stock. Because you might have lots of little bits of card. You can put them all on a mat, scan it in, position your shapes where you want them and cut them all out. So I can see now, I'm just going to make this background darker so that you can see it, which is what we looked at earlier on. So you can see now that I've got the square cut out there. So I know that I can just move this down now, just using my stylus. And I know that I can cut it there and that's getting the best out of my card. So let's do that. So we're going to press OK. Please select cut, and I'm actually going to put it back on to 1 because I know that I'm ready for a new blade in this machine. So I'm just going to put it on 1. You would put it on 0.5 or keep it on auto, because if you've got a brand new blade, it's a brilliant blade. It doesn't rely on the pressure being forced on it. It just does, it uses the blade. So I'm going to press that and then I'm going to press start. The reason that you would need a scanning mat is if you're scanning in something like a tattered lace die cut. Now, you're allowed to do it with tattered lace because Stephanie, and now Paul Wright, who owns tattered lace, because Stephanie hasn't owned tattered lace for a long time, gave you permission to manually cut out a tattered lace die, and I would cut it out of black because scanners work on contrast. Put it inside a scanning mat, which is a clean mat, so it doesn't have a grid on and it doesn't have any adhesive on. Put it inside the scanning mat, and then there's a plastic cover that covers over the top, and scan it in. And you scan it in from the home screen, from the main home screen at the beginning. And then what it will do is it will read that file and you can save it into the machine's memory and resize it. Not all companies allow you to do it, so please check first, because then you're not worrying about any copyright laws. But tattered lace absolutely allow you to do that. If you've done a drawing, or your child's done a drawing, or your grandchild's done a drawing, and you want to scan that in and ask the machine to redraw it, then you would use a scanning mat because it needs a clean background. You can scan in on a cutting mat, but not only will it read the die cut, it will read all the cut lines on your mat. So if you're going to scan in die cuts like tattered lace and make them bigger or make them smaller, I would absolutely advise that you get a scanning mat. If you're just drawing something and you want the machine to cut it out, and we'll do this in the next class, you just draw it and you scan into direct cut. And direct cut is where you put your card with your drawing on a sticky mat, because it's going to cut it out directly from that piece of card. You're not saving it into the machine's memory. So do you need a scanning mat? Yes, if you're going to want to cut scanning die cuts, or if you want to save something into the machine's memory that you're scanning in. Other than that, if you just want to draw stuff and cut it out and create your own cutting files, then you do it on a cutting mat. The machine will not let you cut a scanning mat. It just says it can't cut. So you're safe. And a scanning mat is a one-off purchase. So you would never need to replace your scanning mat unless you get it dirty and it gets marks or glue or whatever else all over it, then you'd need to replace it. But other than that, you wouldn't. I definitely need a new blade because I'm having to pull this out. So you'll know you need a new blade when it starts to not cut correctly. The other time that you need, it might not cut correctly is if your mat isn't sticky enough and your card isn't stuck down firmly enough everywhere, because then it's like trying to cut a carrot without being on a chopping board. It doesn't work like that. So the blade has nothing to cut into. But you've now got your shaped card. So you could have it that way, you could have it that way. And also you could cut another scallop and put it over the top so it hides this, because this is my bugbear. I don't like this bit on a shaped card. So you would then cut another one and glue it over the top. Or you could fold this way like this and use your spatula to fold it and then cut another one and create an easel card. So you're now creating your own shaped cards in the cardstock that you want, in the colour that you want, but more importantly, in the size that you want, because you're in control of that machine. Another thing to think about with a scanner is that any scanner, whether it is in a machine like the Brother Scan and Cut, or whether it's a separate scanner or in a printer, it sees things via contrast. So if you've got a sheet of decoupage that's white and you've got a beautiful, very pale pink rose on it with a green stem and green leaves, and at some point in that pink rose head, it goes really, really, really pale. If the Scan and Cut can't see the difference between that really pale pink and the white background, it can't find it. It needs contrast. So in which case you either just draw a little pencil line around that little bit there and then it finds it, because when it scans in, it needs to find a complete shape. So if you've got an owl stamp and at the top of the owl you've got the ears and then the top of the head is all fluffy and it's little lines that have gaps in between, and then another ear and then the body is complete, it won't find it. So it will go to its next available full shape, which will be the eye. If you draw a little line with a fine liner that joins all those little fluffy bits up at the top, so it's a complete shape, it will then see it. And that's just the way that a scanner works, especially when it's with a cutting machine, because it needs a complete line, a complete shape. If you break that shape at any point and it can't see it, it will go to its next full shape that it can see. And that's the way that it sees things. So it might not be that, you don't need, this is another myth, that you need this thick black line around all your images. You don't. It needs to be a solid shape and it needs to be something that contrasts with the background. And it also needs to be clean, by which I mean not a polka dot or a stripe. Because if you imagine that you've got, let's say you've got a beach ball and it's on a stripy background. When it looks for its outside edge, it will find the beach ball, but then it will find a stripe. So it will find beach ball stripe, beach ball stripe. So you'll end up with a beach ball with all these stripes around it because it sees that line going into the circle as a continual line. We're getting a lot of questions, which I expected from this one. I'm going to get Andrew to keep a note of them all so I can then, where's the best place to put them, Andrew? Answers to the questions. No, not next month's video, because they want to know now. Oh, that's such a... Tell you what, email your questions to me at Mel, I'm going to regret this, mel@highlightcrafts.com. Give me a couple of days because I am up to here in work. I've got 2 big launches this weekend and all the prep to do. Mel, so it's MEL @highlightcrafts with an S.com, and I'll answer your questions directly. I might have hundreds of them by the time I come off this class, but it doesn't matter because the most important thing is that you learn your scan and cut and you get it out of the box, because it just makes me really sad that you spend all that money on a machine and you're not using it. And even if for the first month you just use it to make a shape card and cut your mats and layers out, that's better than it not being in the box, because then you'll go, what's next? What's next? I want to know what's next. I want to learn the next bit. And it's only by pressing buttons and finding out what things do and using it on a regular basis that I know this machine. Because trust me, when I got the first one, I had 7 days to learn it before we flew to the States and launched it. That was terrifying because I had no idea. And the first time I put it, I was used to using a Cricut. So I put my speed on 5, my pressure on 5 and my blade on 5, and it cut a massive circle out the middle of my mat. So we've all been there. And all the mistakes that I've made, I want to teach you so that you don't make them. But I also want to teach you how the machine sees things, how to make it work to your advantage, how to get the most out of it, and how to really get on board with the scan and cut. Because once you start, you will open up this whole world of creativity that, although you've got dies, and dies are amazing, you can't stretch a die, or you can't weld 2 dies together and have that perfect seam. You can't put in an aperture in the middle of a card. You can do that. Creating a frame and then another frame that sits perfectly in the middle of it is so easy on the scan and cut, but you need to learn the basics first. So I know we're not going to cover half of what you want to learn in this class, but we're going to do it at a nice pace. So what I want you to do between now and next month is practice cutting out a basic shape, linking it to your network at home, so you've got your Wi-Fi set up, and welding 2 shapes together to make a shaped card. And that's what I want to see you. That's what I want you to practice. That's your homework, like being back at school. That's your homework between now and next month. Now, some of you might already know how to do that. Then the next class might teach you something else. You might get 6 months down the line. This is about people who have never got it out of the box before, getting it out and starting to use it properly. Because honestly, A, you'll save a fortune on card because you're not wasting anything. B, you'll look at this completely differently and not be scared of it, because there's nothing to be scared of. People say, I'm scared I'll break it. You can't break it unless you drop it from the top of a building. You're not going to break it. So there's nothing to be scared of. The auto blade stops you cutting through your mat. And actually, this mat is a dense plastic. So to get through that, you'd have to really have some real depth on your blade and really high pressure. So as long as you keep that cut amount low and relevant to your card, you've nothing to worry about, I promise you. You won't cut through a mat, you won't destroy the machine, none of that. The one thing that I would say is when you're loading your mat and you put it up to those rollers, keep hold of it. Because if you let it go and one roller grabs that and it loads it in sideways, you can't use your mat again. It's really hard to get it to load because it's damaged it, because it's twisted it, and then that roller can't grab it. So always, always keep hold of your mat. You don't need to push it in like this. You just put it under the rollers, put that little bit of pressure on it, and then press your load mat, and it will load perfectly. Okay? Right, that's it for this month. We have a code for you. So every time we do a free, even if it's a free class, we'll give you a discount code for the website. So this time the code is MEL, capital letters, MEL. That's you. SVG, and I've got it written down. I'm just laughing that they've used my name. MEL SVG 50. And that entitles you to 50% off any of the USBs, the first 5 USBs that we've brought you from Two Red Robins. So chapters 1 to 20, and they're in 4 chapter USBs. So you get 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 8, whatever. I don't know, my words have gone now. But you'll get those, it's on the screen. So if you go into highlightcrafts.com, you choose a USB, and we'll talk about USBs as we go through. Not yet. You've got till the 11th of August, midnight, to use it if you want to, but there's no pressure to. It's entirely up to you. That's just something that you might think, oh, I might fancy one of those USBs. Now I'm starting to use my scan and cut, take advantage of it. And I know, because Diane's told me today, that once we've got all the accessories back in, because Brother are out of stock of mats at the moment, there will be a discount code after the class for the accessories, which will be amazing. So thank you very much for your time. I promise you, email me. So email address again, mel@highlightcrafts with an S on the end.com, and I will get your emails answered as soon as I possibly can. Okay, we might need to record some of the answers, Andrew's saying, because we've got loads of questions. Those questions might come up in another class. So if you've already got it out of the box and you've cut a basic shape, you'll have questions that will be answered further down the line, because I have to start right at the beginning. And as much as I want to spend 3 hours and go into all the other stuff that it will do, I have to really rein myself in and make myself do it a little bit at a time, because these classes have been set up for people who have never got it out of the box. That's what this is about, because I do not want anybody sitting with hundreds of pounds worth of crafting equipment sat in a box. So that's the deal. We'll see you next month. I've got to go and do one for the CM customers now. So I'm going to do all this all over again. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Don't forget that next month we'll let you know when it is. So keep an eye on our Facebook and our social medias, and then you can register for that one as well. And we'll send you all the information you need. But every month going forward, we will do one, and it will be this time. So when you've got back from work, had your tea, all the rest of it, we'll sort it out for them. So take care, have a fabulous week, and join Stephanie now on Friday night on Create and Craft, and then me on Sunday, because we've got some fabulous launches coming up, and we'll see you there. Take care, lots of love.